Hello and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about how to add texture to your writing, so you're not just spitting out boring shit no one wants to read. The 3 strategies that we're going to talk about today will make your writing a lot more interesting, no matter what you're writing. First of all, we got to diagnose the problem. Why is most nonfiction writing so boring to read? If we're ever honest with ourselves, we'll start to realize that most of the stuff that we've written in our lifetimes, in high school and university, or even writing an email, they all in some shape or form follow this boring workflow when you write it. So first of all, you conceive a topic, and you're gonna probably find some research around that topic, and then you're gonna read all that research over 50 cups of coffee, and maybe after a few days of arduous research, you're gonna try to cobble all of it together into some logical piece of argument. But the problem with that workflow, or that kind of rigid way of presenting ideas as just regurgitating research, is that it treats writing as a mere presentation of ideas. Whereas the most intriguing books, the most intriguing think pieces, you get the sense that the writer is thinking with you on the page. And I think one of the best examples of this is Malcolm Gladwell's 2004 essay in The New Yorker titled The Ketchup Conundrum. When I first read this title, I kind of expected a long and meandering read about the history of ketchup, the American obsession with tomatoes, or something about soup or food research, right? I wasn't very interested in it. But 10 pages into reading this essay, I was completely glued, and very quickly I realized what Malcolm Gladwell was doing. See, most essays are boring to read because it just kind of reads like the author spitting a laundry list of all their clever research. In a best case scenario, it reads as interesting as the label on the back of a pickle jar. But Malcolm Gladwell is that crazy neighbor who smashes the pickle jar, eats a pickle, and rants to you all about what the pickle tastes like. In other words, he is a master at digressing on a page and thinking with the reader on the page. And this makes perfect sense for a think piece, because the root word for the word essay is actually essayer in the French, meaning to try things, right? As you're writing an essay, you're in fact trying different things out with your readers on a page. And Gladwell did this in 3 different ways that we can all utilize in our own writing. First, you need to find a weird opening. Forget about starting an essay with, "In this piece I will explore." You don't want your readers to read what they're already expecting. And in fact, when Malcolm Gladwell started his stint at The New Yorker in 1996, he hated the standard form of a long-form reporting. In an interview with the chief editor of The New Yorker, he confessed,
"I could no more do that than I could go to the moon. I literally just get tired and overwhelmed and run out of questions, and I just kind of sew it up and go home."
And his workaround for this problem:
if I'm going to write about person X, they can occupy 25% of the piece, and I can fill the other 75% with ruminations on what they mean, with a digression that ultimately helps you understand the person more.
And boy, when it comes down to this piece about ketchup, oh my god, did he digress. As you can see, he moves all over the place. Moves from Jim Wiggin to food experiments to mustards. But long story short, he did not start an essay about ketchup with talking about ketchup. At first glance, it might have seemed like Malcolm has broken the rules of nonfiction writing. You start with a subject and stay on topic, and the essay might come off as a little bit disorganized, but if you stick with the essay long enough, which I would really encourage you to read, you can read it in the description for free down below. Opening an essay about ketchup with something completely irrelevant is what I call a weird opening. This is when you begin an essay with something seemingly unrelated, only to pull it back a few paragraphs in. In schools, we're so used to starting an essay with laying out everything about the essay, what you should expect in the essay, yada yada yada, and by the time we reach page 3, all the people are asleep. But out in the real world of writing, you need to make your readers care as soon as possible. And the quickest way to do that is to find an intriguing story or an anecdote that links to your key idea. You can do this with an interesting historical factoid. You can do this with a surprising statistic. You can start a piece with a mind-bending psychological study, and when all else fails, etymology is a great place to start. You can simply start an essay with investigating the root word of a topic that you're about to address. And this principle of finding a weird opening is great for one of 2 reasons. Number 1, your reader will get an immediate payoff. You've already scratched your curiosity within the first paragraph, so there's an immediate kind of reward for like, oh my god, this story is intriguing. And number 2, it's a lot easier to start an essay with borrowed ideas. It's a lot easier to find an opening from which you'll find your own flow of ideas. And if you're disciplined enough to reel it back a few paragraphs in, opening an essay essay with an intriguing idea that seems to have nothing to do with your main topic is always a great strategy to add more texture to your nonfiction writing. And speaking of great strategies that will make us into better writers and better thinkers, today's episode was brought to you by Brilliant.org. And yes, you've caught me at a bad time because yours truly is moving to a new place. Everything here has been packed into little boxes as I'm getting ready to design a new room. Which brings me to one of the less flattering revelations that I had about myself, which is I had zero spatial reasoning. And here's the thing, I can read about furniture design, I can watch YouTube videos on interior design, but none of it helps if you're staring at an empty room wondering where the sofa's gonna go. What I needed wasn't more information, but I needed real-time feedback to teach me subjects such as spatial reasoning, basic geometry, calculus, and all the other subjects that I really struggled with back when I was in high school. And this kind of feedback and direct tutoring is expensive for most kids who are going to high school or most STEM majors in universities, which is why I started using Brilliant.org's tutor, Koji, to help me out with some of my conundrums, as well as to sustain a lifelong passion for learning. It covers everything from basic pre-calculus, geometry, as well as advanced machine learning. And what surprised me is that the Koji tutor never gives you a direct answer. He drew on my screen, broke the problem into steps, and kept asking questions until I got to the solution myself. And as someone who wished that he had had this kind of education when he was in high school, this is the kind of feedback that every STEM student deserves when they're struggling through a very difficult problem in high school or university. So if you're a parent, a student, an educator who's just sick and tired of all these things that will never help you to learn mathematics and sciences, the Koji tutor is one of the best resources out there to not only teach you the subject, but to teach you how to think more clearly. Try Brilliant and Koji for free and get 20% off of an annual subscription at brilliant.org/Robin Waldun. And thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the segment. So after you've embraced a weird opening, now it's time to move on to step number 2. Research as you write. One of my favorite episodes of Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, is episode 2 in season 12. At the time, Malcolm was putting together a piece on a 2019 Varsity Blues scandal. He was on vacation with his family, and his cousin mentioned something about a college admission scandal around a pool. And at the time, Malcolm was a bit bored and needed something to read. And like any well-adjusted adult, he ordered a court transcript next to the pool, all 1,200 pages of it, by the way, and he just started reading it. This is fascinating because whenever we think of doing research for anything, we always think of lower back pains. We always think of hunching over the desk for 12 hours a day trying to gather all the research we need to write something. But Gladwell painted us a completely different picture. For him, doing research is all about seizing your curiosity in the moment and trusting that it's going to lead back to the story later on. And in fact, in this essay about ketchups, there are loads of psychological studies and loads of weird tangents, but at some point he reeled them all back into a very intriguing argument. This is very different from how research was taught in schools, which is to find relevant sources, stick with a topic, but in reality, it is way better to find things that really interest you and to trust that in the end, they're all going to connect into something that you did not expect. And for a writer who's excited about using writing as a medium to explore the world, the best stuff usually comes at the edge of a paragraph, not what's within the confines of your research. In other words, don't make your writing follow your research. Make your research follow your writing. Because ultimately, writing is the highest form of thinking, and its magic usually comes from chasing tangents as you write. And at this point in the video, I know what you're thinking. Okay, Robin, you're telling us to start an essay with a weird opening, and then you're telling us to chase tangents, but how do we end an essay? It seems like it's really easy to get lost in a wild goose chase without ever reeling anything back. Well, here's the interesting part about many great pieces of nonfiction writing. The idea that started the piece usually ends the piece. For example, in this piece about ketchup, it started with this guy trying to rival Heinz ketchup. And at the end of the essay, after dozens of digressions, we're coming back to the same issue of the piece, which is why could no one ever rival Heinz ketchup? And this is the core of good logical flow in your writing. The idea that starts your essay, that weird opening that you have that leads to the main idea, should ultimately end the story to bring about a full circle moment for your readers. And as your readers are reading the piece, there's a natural narrative flow because they can't wait to find out the ending to your story. So next time, as you're working on a think piece, as you're cobbling words together and you don't know how to end it, always refer to the start of the essay. Was there an idea that you can rephrase in a different way to end the essay? Is there an old problem in your life that now you can look at it from a completely different perspective? And in Malcolm Gladwell's words, one of the mistakes that I think writers make is that they spend a lot of time thinking about how to start their stories and not a lot of time thinking about how to end them. So, when in doubt, if you want to give your reader a satisfying end to a think piece, a story, or an essay that you're writing for school, always end the essay with a new spin on something that you've already covered in the first paragraph. And that is all I have for today's episode. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it, and I hope that you've been trying out some of the tips and tricks in writing that I've been giving out recently. And if you haven't seen a video on how to write a micro essay, which is the most important writing habit that you can adopt on a daily basis, you can check it out right here. Anyway, Robin Waldun here. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.